Shestoka is just perfect. And it's always a challenge for a lot of people. I will tell you that in early spring last year, I had the occasion to travel with the folks from Real America's Voice. I've written a couple of books, one about the Declaration of Independence, one about the Constitution. We were in Philadelphia, and they called me up to explain some things about what happened in Pennsylvania during the elections of 2020, where I was one of the president's lawyers during the course of that time. And strangely enough, they put me on a little box, they gave me a little earpiece, and they put me on the air with Steve Bannon. And Mr. Bannon proceeded to say, well, today we have Mr. Shetasky. And I became known as Shetasky for the rest of the tour. You know, they could mix it up with mushrooms and some other things, but it is Shestokas, and it's the common spelling. There's a whole separate story about that, but it seemed like the Steve Bannon story was the right one for today. People have mentioned I am running for Attorney General, and people, a couple of folks have mentioned the fact about Madigan's indictments the last couple of days. And that's really, really nice, but you know, there's something, and it's good for us in many ways, but there's something really sad about Mike Madigan's indictments, all 22 counts of them, and that he's been in power here in the state of Illinois for 50 years. And the indictments came from the federal government. Are you telling me he did not break any Illinois laws during the course of those 50 years, running up to these indictments? Do you know that, in fact, the Attorney General has the authority to prosecute corruption here in the state of Illinois? That's one of the reasons, that's one of the things about my, one of my slogans for the campaign about make crime illegal again. You know, that's one of them. But as a bit of background, I'm a former prosecutor myself. I was involved in over 400 felony prosecutions and investigations. I worked with the police on making charging decisions. I did over 10,000 misdemeanor cases in that regard. And this is something else people do not know about the Illinois Attorney General's office because they never utilize this authority. And that is that they do have the authority, the Attorney General has the authority to go and prosecute cases where the local prosecutors refuse to do it. And this is something, again, this fits in with make crime illegal again. And it's not just Kim Foxx in Cook County that this is a problem. I've been traveling around the state. I've heard horror stories from sheriffs and other police officers where they've arrested people for any number of heinous crimes. Mark Weiss up in Lake County was telling me about a situation where there was a home invasion that turned into, there was going to be a burglary, people died, and they just prosecuted them for burglary, not for felony murder. So this is not just a Cook County matter. It is around the state where we have these woke prosecutors who think more of the criminals than they do of the victims. And I think that's important for people to realize and understand. There's a brand new Attorney General in Virginia. The brand new Attorney General of Virginia, Mr. Menieres, on his first day in the office said the same, what I will say on my first day in the office, to the local prosecutors. If you do not prosecute the crimes that are necessary to protect the people of our state, my office will. And we are going to prosecute those cases that need to be prosecuted to protect the people of the state of Illinois. And now we're just about to the end of the petition season. I haven't normally talked about anybody that I'm running against, but I will tell you this, that there's two other folks that I know of that are running this, running for in the primary for Attorney General. And as to those two other folks, the next time either of them prosecute a criminal case will be the first time that they prosecute a criminal case. I, on the other hand, have done more than 10,000. So if you want somebody that's going to stand up and help clean up the criminal situation, we have everybody, there's people running for all kinds of offices, and crime is a very important issue that they talk to, except for the sheriff over here. There's only one other job that has something to do with that I can actually do something about it, and that would be the Attorney General. And I have that kind of experience. Now, we've heard about elections. Let's talk about that kind of experience. I mentioned in 2020 I was one of the president's lawyers in Pennsylvania, and I wound up testifying before the Pennsylvania Senate on what went wrong in Pennsylvania. I observed a whole lot of things, but before that, in 2016, I was actually on the Trump-Rubio team in Florida and discovered and set aside 150,000 illegally open ballots in Broward County. Currently, I serve, Jen referred to it, I serve with Chairman Smith on the State Ballot Integrity Committee. I've been put there for that purpose because of that experience. As a result of that experience, I met some of the most amazing data people in the country that are now assisting us in doing what we need to do to clean up the voter rolls in Illinois. So I'm actively working on that personally with Chairman Smith and the rest of our committee. Beyond all that, I'm also the lawyer for the Illinois Conservative Union. And as the attorney for the Illinois Conservative Union, the leadership of the union about 3 years ago went down to the Board of Elections and asked for the voter data that they needed to determine whether or not the elections were being, whether or not the voter rolls were being cleaned. The Board of Elections told them no, they can't have that data. You didn't tell Carol Davis and that team no. So I ultimately filed suit on their behalf and against the Illinois State Board of Elections, and they are entitled to that data according to federal law, National Voter Registration Act, to determine whether or not their voter rolls have been compliant with keeping them clean. And what's happened was all we asked the Board of Elections to do was follow the law, right? And all the Board of Elections said in answer to that, our request that they follow the law was, we don't have to. And you know who the lawyer for the Board of Elections is? The Illinois Attorney General. The Illinois Attorney General is telling the citizens of the state of Illinois that the government of the state of Illinois does not have to follow the law. This is wrong. This is wrong. And they not only, yes. And that's my personal experience with that. But you know, we won a motion to dismiss the case in that case. Then they filed another motion to dismiss. We won that one. And then they now send us these interrogatories and other kinds of documentation that they want. And they're asking Carol Davis and her other 3 grandmother friends that are working on this project what their most recent felony convictions are, how recently they've been in prison, what kind of records they have. They're actually, what they're doing is practicing what we would call lawfare. Okay, the Attorney General has a half a dozen assistant Attorney Generals working on this case rather than protecting the people. And this issue about whether or not we're entitled to that information has been decided in 12 other states. It's not new law. It's nothing special. And what the Attorney General should have done is, as soon as we filed the lawsuit, he can't keep track of what's going on in every agency, but as soon as we filed the lawsuit, he should have called me up and said, hey, Dave, come on in, what's going on? You know, what can we do? What's going on? And I would have explained to him that this is the law, and he should have said, you know, you're right. And he should have called the Board of Elections and said, give them the data, because they're entitled to it. But that's not the only case this is going on. I also did I represented a church in the early days of the pandemic in Grundy County, Standing in the Word Ministries, where churches were being declared non-essential. We got that church to be open shortly in August of 2020. And Grundy County, for all practical purposes, has been acting like J.B. Pritzker doesn't exist. Of course, none of that's news. Nobody makes news about that. But we got the church open, so I'm doing the stuff with the Board of Elections, and did some exposure with the Romanian church that wound up going all the way to Supreme Court. There's another half a dozen assistant attorney generals working on that case, where they should have said, no, church is essential. And so there's about 30, 40 assistant attorney generals that are now litigating against the people of the state of Illinois rather than protecting the people of the state of Illinois. And I would take all those attorney generals and put them on duty to oversee the local prosecutors who are not prosecuting crimes. So we have the assets to do exactly what I'm suggesting we do. So I would suggest to you I had a bunch of notes. There's all kinds of stuff that I want to talk about. But you know what? There's an interesting thing about the Attorney General's job. It's one of the unusual jobs in the legal profession. You did your job. The Attorney General is elected by the people, not by the. He's not appointed by the governor, not approved by the Senate, but elected by the people. One of the few jobs in the legal field where your duty is actually to justice. Okay, often you're supposed to zealously advocate for your client and whatnot, but this is where you're supposed to do justice. That's what I said. You would call the citizens in and say, "The citizen, you guys are doing the right thing, and let's tell the government agencies to comply." And so this is that's a very, very important aspect of the job that people do not understand. And that's a job that I did understand. While I talk about the prosecutions, I do know that when I stood up in the morning in front of the judge and said, "Good morning, Your Honor. This is, I'm David Shostokis." Yeah. On behalf of the people of the state of Illinois, I knew that the guy over there that was accused of something was one of the people as well. And I owed just as much an obligation that if the government was going to do something to try and take his life, liberty, or property, that we had to follow due process of law. And we had to have the evidence and do the things proper to do that. And so he was just as much a client of mine as the individuals who were victims of crime. So it's a very, very special job, and it's a unique position. And I think anybody that hasn't had that job before in the legal profession should reconsider about whether or not they should use the top law enforcement justice seeking job in the country, in the state, as their first government job. So in that regard, I certainly would hope that you would consider those kinds of credentials. I've got people talk about elections. I've done plenty with elections. I'm involved in doing things regarding cleaning Illinois elections now. People talk about criminal aspects, corruption aspects. I've done already 400 felony prosecutions and 10,000 misdemeanor matters. I can look at a police report and know what's going to happen in that case for the next 2 years. I can do that in about 5 or 10 minutes because we've done that. And so we know how to do those kind of controls. And so I would suggest to you that the kind of experience that I bring relative to elections, relative to prosecution, relative to involvement in other kind of government activities, I would suggest that I'm probably the best qualified to be your next Attorney General, and I hope that you would consider that. I'm Dave Shostokis. Shostokis, can you say Shostokis?
Shostokis.
Excellent, excellent. You did much better than Steve Bannon. Thank you so much. I'm Dave Shostokis.